Yahoo Sports Top 10. How Saturday's results shook up the rankings. Saturday's action in college football, particularly from the SEC and the Group of Five, has led to some reshuffling in the top 10 rankings, with several teams either holding steady or getting knocked off their perch. The SEC was again at the center of the chaos. The conference's trademark slogan, "It just means more," was more relevant than ever this week, as a crowded field of contenders continued to fight it out at the top. With just 2 weeks left in the regular season, there are still major questions about how many SEC teams will make the college football playoff and how to sort out the teams that have beaten one another into a near impossible knot. But enough of the SEC saga. Let's get to the rankings and how Saturday's results impacted the top 10. 1. Oregon Ducks. This week, beat Wisconsin 16-13. Next week, bye. Oregon survived a scare on the road in Madison, trailing 13-6 in the third quarter before rallying to take the lead. Despite a failed fake field goal attempt late in the game, the Ducks sealed the win thanks to a game-clinching interception. This was a gritty, championship-caliber win for Dan Lanning's squad. 2. Ohio State Buckeyes. This week, beat Northwestern 31-7. Next week, versus Indiana. After falling behind 7-0 early, Ohio State quickly regained control, scoring 3 touchdowns in a 6-minute burst to put away Northwestern. This win sets up a showdown with Indiana, with the Buckeyes needing a win to stay in the hunt for the Big Ten title. 3. Indiana Hoosiers. This week, bye. Next week, at Ohio State. Indiana had a well-timed bye and will face Ohio State next week in a game that could significantly impact the Big Ten standings. Coach Curt Cignetti has already led the Hoosiers to their first 10-win season in program history. But a tough test awaits in Columbus. 4. Georgia Bulldogs. This week, beat Tennessee 31-17. Next week, versus UMass. Georgia reasserted itself as a top contender in the SEC, taking down Tennessee for the 8th straight year, trailing 10-0. QB Carson Beck had one of his best performances, racking up nearly 350 passing yards and leading the Bulldogs to a 31-17 victory. 5. Texas Longhorns. This week, beat Arkansas 20-10. Next week, versus Kentucky, in a game where the Texas offense looked far from its best. The Longhorns relied on their defense to pull away from Arkansas. Burt Auburn's field goals provided key points, but the defense did enough to get Steve Sarkisian's team a win. Though Texas's offense will need to be sharper in upcoming games. 6. Penn State Nittany Lions. This week, beat Purdue 49-10. Next week, at Minnesota. Penn State is steaming toward an 11-1 finish, and their dominance over Purdue kept them well in the playoff hunt. Tyler Warren continued to showcase his elite playmaking ability, finishing with 127 yards and 2 touchdowns. If they keep this up, they could host a playoff game at Happy Valley. 7. Ole Miss Rebels. This week, bye. Next week, at Florida. Ole Miss took a break this week after a huge win over Georgia. They now need to win their final 2 games to have a shot at the playoff, with a road game at Florida and a home contest against Mississippi State standing in the way. 8. Notre Dame Fighting Irish. This week, beat Virginia 35-14. Next week, versus Army, New York. Notre Dame is red hot, winning their 8th consecutive game following a rough start to the season. Jeremiah Love led the charge with 137 yards and 2 touchdowns in a dominant victory over Virginia, keeping the Irish firmly in the playoff mix. 9. SMU Mustangs. This week, beat Boston College 38-28. Next week, at Virginia. SMU avoided a letdown in a tough road game against Boston College, thanks to a strong performance from QB Kevin Jennings, 298 yards. 3 TDs. With only 1 loss on the season, SMU is still in the hunt for a potential Group of 5 spot in the playoff, but they need to continue to win. 10. Miami Hurricanes. This week, bye. Next week, versus Wake Forest. Miami returns to the top 10 after a week off, despite a narrow win over a lackluster Georgia Tech earlier in the season. They've had some close calls. But Cam Ward remains a standout player. With 2 wins to end the year, the Hurricanes will be in the ACC championship game. Dropped out. BYU, 4. The Cougars suffered their first loss of the season to Kansas, dropping them out of the rankings. Tennessee, 8. Despite a solid season, Tennessee's loss to Georgia pushed them out of the top 10. Notable results and other headlines. Deion Sanders and Colorado won their 4th straight game, improving to 8-2 and controlling their path to the Big 12 title game. Boise State survived a challenge from San Jose State to stay atop the group of 5 and remain in the playoff hunt. Clemson kept their ACC title hopes alive with a win, while Missouri, Kansas State, and Pitt were eliminated from playoff contention after tough losses. Florida stunned LSU, handing the Tigers their 4th loss of the season, while Stanford came from behind to beat Louisville for their first FBS home win in 2 years. Saturday's results have once again proven that the college football landscape is ever-changing. And as we move toward the final weeks, the stakes only get higher. With playoff spots still up for grabs, it promises to be an exciting finish to the regular season.